are now live.
Well, good morning everyone and welcome to this meeting of the Adults and Community Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. I am Councillor Callum Cook, the Vice Chairman of this committee, and in the absence of Councillor Hugo Marfleet, I will be chairing today's meeting. So just a couple of housekeeping rules. So there's no fire drill planned for today, and obviously you know the usual way out should there be a fire alarm. Could I ask that anybody here in the chamber, if they do have their mobile phone devices or iPads, that they're all switched to silent, please? Otherwise, we shall move on to the first agenda item of the day, which is apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillors Marfleet, Parking and Young, and we have Councillor Sear replacing Councillor Marfleet for this meeting only.
I understand we've also got Councillor Wendy Bokett's apologies as well. Therefore, moving on to declarations of members' interests. So if any member has anything to declare at any point throughout this meeting, please let us know. Otherwise, your standing declarations will obviously apply for this meeting. Moving on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of September. Do we have any comments or amendments to those minutes? If not, I'm happy to propose those minutes. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Carter. And all those in favour, please do indicate. And any abstentions? One abstention from Councillor Sear. Thank you. Therefore, moving on to announcements and updates. There's no chairman's updates from me today. Obviously, Councillor Bokett's not here with us. And I don't believe Martin Samuels is here with us either. So, therefore, there'll be no announcements from any of our team. Therefore, we move on to the first full agenda item, which is agenda item number 5, which is the workforce recruitment and retention. The committee last received several reports previously on the development of the workforce, including recruitment and retention. This item provides information on the latest position on initiatives to strengthen the workforce. I believe we have two presenters, Chris Erskine, who is the Principal Social Work and Improvement and Development Lead, and Melanie Weatherly, MBE, the Chair of the Lincolnshire Care Association. And for all the reports today, if I could ask officers to take it that all the members have read the reports, a maximum of 5 minutes per report, and then we'll crack on to questions and debate. So I'm happy to either hand over to Chris or Melanie.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. So I'm Chris Erskine, Principal Social Worker, and I'm here with Melanie Weatherly today. The report is intended to give an overview in terms of our planning, recruitment and retention activities across adult care, internal and external workforce. So we've included demographic information, statistics, risks and actions that we can take to address the workforce challenges. The report provides detail in terms of some of the information that's really critical for us to understand our current workforce landscape and future challenges. Some of the strategic initiatives that are taking place to consider things like apprenticeships, health and wellbeing support, diversity and inclusion efforts, all of those things that are really essential for us to continue to improve our recruitment and retention across health and social care. In terms of the report, we've aligned it with the national strategies as well. We believe it's really important that the workforce for health and social care aligns with the national strategies and ensuring that the efforts we're taking locally and regionally as well reflect the broader national goals. We've also been taking a focus in terms of diversity and inclusion, and one of the things that we've done more recently is to sign up to the Workforce Race Equality Standard in Lincolnshire for adult care, and that really supports us to think about how we can ensure we're making positive steps towards a really inclusive work environment. Something that's been very successful and really given us an evidence base for moving forward is the work we've been doing around succession planning as well, thinking about the importance of understanding our future workforce needs. So you'll see some of that in the report as well. We are seeing some challenges both nationally and locally. We know that the social care sector can be a challenge to recruit to. There's been more recent data than is included in the report that was released in the last couple of weeks. Melanie, did you want to say something about that?
Thank you. Yes. Is that working? Yeah. The most recent report, which takes us to March 2024, suggested in Lincolnshire we've had another 1,000 recruits into our sector, and our vacancy rate is at 8.2%, which is lower than the national average. The downside to the most recent figures is that less than half of our workforce have a relevant qualification in adult social care. And that's partly due to the fact that the national landscape for adult care qualifications has changed, and is changing. But I think that is a big challenge, because one of the things that retains people and demonstrates their skills is if they can actually acquire relevant qualifications. And from Lincolnshire, both through the local authority providers and the colleges, we are trying to work with the Department for Education and the Department of Health and Social Care to try and address that issue. But that, I think, is one of our biggest challenges, that if there's no qualification, people won't stay.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. We know, building on that, that one of the real successes in our internal workforce has been around apprenticeships. So you'll see highlighted in the report a year-on-year increase in the number of people we're supporting through apprenticeships. Recently, this week, I had some additional information shared with me that's showing that those people stay with us. They may move teams, but they tend to stay with us and become our leaders of the future as well. And we've got some fantastic examples where we've supported people through, perhaps they've started at the customer service centre, or they've started within as a carer within a care provider, and we can really see that journey. And supporting people through apprenticeships has been a really important part of that. So we recognise there are some challenges. There's some really positive work taking place, but I'm going to stop there and let you ask some questions.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much. Well, I'll use the chairman's prerogative and I'll go first then. I think my first question is, obviously, and thank you for your report and the brevity of it, but given the ageing workforce, with over 16% of staff approaching retirement age in the next 5 years, how are we as a council preparing for that significant loss of experience? You know, what sort of strategies are in place to ensure the transfer of that sort of institutional knowledge before those retirements occur, is my first question.
I think it's a really good question. We know from our succession planning information that we I think it's something in the region of 70% of our workforce are coming up for retirement in sort of in a fairly quick period of time. But one of the key things that we've been able to do through the recruitment and retention process is identify people through the succession planning that are ready to progress as well. So we've got detailed information about across each teams which are the people that have been identified to be future leaders. We've identified an opportunity to explore roles where people will have an opportunity to take on more leadership within their teams, and that's something that has been tested out in a couple of teams at the moment. So we're looking at an impact analysis around the benefits of that. But I think in the external workforce, Melanie, you've often talked about some of the challenges in relation to an ageing workforce.
Yes, and I think within the external workforce, there is a problem with the throughput for young people. But what we're actually doing is actively recruiting veterans, people leaving local authorities and the NHS at 55 with a pension, but with no intention of stopping work. They might not do full-time work, but they bring with them all of their previous experience, and that's been very successful, because once you get them, they don't tend to go because it fulfills their needs, and they've got a pension, so it doesn't matter to them that it's a really lowly paid opportunity, because that's not what they're looking for.
Just expanding on, you were talking about recruitment, and obviously one of the things I think I've picked up in the report in terms of workforce diversity, and obviously with ongoing challenges in recruiting a diverse workforce, what specific initiatives are we looking at to attract candidates from underrepresented groups?
We've had a number of initiatives on recruiting men into the care sector, but we need to work with Chris and his teams, because a lot of particularly our older ladies, really aren't very happy about having a male care worker. So whilst we want to increase the diversity of the workforce, we need to make sure they need extra skills to be able to make themselves acceptable. Once they've got those extra skills, a lot of our ladies quite like having a young man, but they do need to have skills that are not in the normal induction process. So that's the side. In terms of other diversity, we have got a more ethically divergent group of workforce than we had ever had before. But that's not intentional. That was because the only place we could find any staff was outside the UK. Lincolnshire has actually been quite lucky. We've only got fairly low numbers, which means we've actually been able to onboard them properly, and they haven't caused the problems that they have in some of our larger urban areas where there's been disruption from that.
Just finally, before I open Obviously, in terms of retention outside of financial incentives, so obviously beyond competitive pay and apprenticeships, how is the council addressing the underlying issues of work-life balance and job satisfaction, particularly among younger staff?
I think that's something we do together between the councillors, commissioners and the providers. And one particular thing is the transfer of some of the review and assessment process within our home care sector from Chris's team to the external workforce, because it gives a career path for a home care worker that involves them staying actually in the field, still delivering care, which wasn't there before then, and they can see that. And also I think career pathways, they maybe start within a social care provider and move on to the health service or social care, or backwards. If you've been running A&E for 20 years, you might actually want to come and run a nursing home for a bit. So I think the way we do that in Lincolnshire is as a system, by looking at people's career path right across their career journey and trying to explain that to schools. So you can come in to work in part-time in a care home at 16 and you might end up as the chief exec of ULHT.
Super, thank you. Councillor Lee, I think you were first.
Oh, that one's working. I just want to endorse all of the things that Melanie, if you don't mind me calling you Melanie, that she said there. Speaks a lady that talks an awful lot of sense from someone who's been in a caring profession for 21 years. Just going through it, you talked about the flexibility and people who are retired might want to work backwards. That's absolutely true, because working in many nursing homes and healthcare environments, you have to do very long shifts, 12 and 13 hours. And I personally am retiring from that on Saturday. You don't need it anymore when you're old. Do you know what I mean? So I do get what you say entirely. And your point about a nursing home, someone actually tried to persuade me after I left Parliament to be a nursing home manager, but it wasn't for me. I wanted to go back into healthcare. But I do actually totally take that point, and I think you're absolutely spot on. I think actually the most important thing is paying people a decent wage. It absolutely is. I think training is a wonderful thing. It shows that you value your staff, because your staff are always your best resource. I've always thought that in any environment. And training in them, you're investing in them. But it's not the be-all and end-all. It really isn't. As a nurse, I know healthcares that are really, really good. And, you know, they have had training, but some haven't, but they're still good. So it's not the only thing, but that's not to say I'm saying don't train. I think absolutely train, because I think you're right. It does retain people, and you're absolutely right about it being the start of a career path. I know no end of healthcares that then went on to train to be RNs. You know, so I just think what you say is just absolutely true. In terms of diversity, I think it's really important that the workforce reflects the population that they're looking after. So it is important. But again, what you say about male carers, old ladies don't always like men doing washes and things like that. But they do come round to it, and it is a process of winning their trust. You know, and that's not just true about men. It's all kinds of people representative of a diverse population of staff. And I would say that actually adequate levels of staffing are more important than the absolute focus on diversity, but that's not dismissing it. And I think that's all the points I was going to make, but I would endorse every word that you said, and you're obviously going to a lot of trouble and an effort to try to get a broad, well-qualified workforce, and I would absolutely support that. Well done.
Thank you. And can I say that we do that because of the support of Lincolnshire County Council? In some areas, the council commissioners try to work out what the independent sector needs. In Lincolnshire, it's not like that. Lincolnshire say, here are the resources, get on with it. And I think that makes a huge difference. And I think it also saves you money, because we don't spend money quite as easily as maybe you do.
Lovely, thank you. I don't know if I'd like to set that comment or not, to be honest. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Very interesting report. Really enjoyed reading it. On page 13, you've got your apprenticeship figures rising. Presumably, you're going to be making greater efforts for next year to get even more apprenticeships on the books. In trying to retain staff, I put a question there about considering part-time, but then further on in your report, you answer my question with your approach to flexible working, which obviously is brilliant and it suits a lot more people that way. Had you looked at, or do you look at, trying to recruit people that initially start off in the volunteer section, and therefore, as it were, your succession planning seems to be working in other areas? Is that something that you're considering? Thank you.
I think Melanie and I are fighting to answer this one. So we absolutely want to encourage people who are working in the voluntary sector into adult care, and some of the work we are doing around co-production will support us to do that. So reaching out to people who have lived experience, people who already draw on care and support. We've seen some real success in day operations, supporting people into work and being employed by the local authority. But I think there's more we can do in that area to encourage people, perhaps to work within the wider care sector, but there are also opportunities working for Lincolnshire County Council, perhaps through things like apprenticeships as well.
Thank you. And I think one comment on the apprenticeships work really well for more senior roles. At the moment, the level 2 and level 3 apprenticeship in care is almost impossible to find. And that is something that we're trying to lobby government as they do the changes and the Skills England looks at things. But certainly for a full-time student, there are no level 2 apprenticeships that work in this county and not in the country because the college can't deliver them for the cost. So we're looking at, particularly post-devolution, when there's more flexibility, can we do a Lincolnshire apprenticeship in adult care that meets the needs of the sector? Because the one that's on the books just doesn't meet the needs of either the young people or the sector. It works for older people who want to upskill themselves, but it just doesn't work for our young people. So we've more or less stopped doing them, which is a real shame.
Thank you for that information.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Callum. Thank you for your report, both of you. It's really informative and gives out such a lot of information and actually highlights the difficulties that you're having. And I don't think you're alone in any organisation with retention and recruitment. It's right across the county in various aspects. You did mention on page 16 about addressing the workload and mental health to understand and address the underlying reasons for high rates of sickness absence. Well, of course, that's going to impact on your recruitment and retention as well, isn't it? So I just really wanted to ask, what are the strategies in place now for you to address that, understand that? And I think actually part of that would be, as you have pointed out, to professionalise the care system. You're wanting to do that. It needs to be done. And with the loss of the NVQ2 isn't hitting it. So you've already identified where you want to go, and obviously devolution is going to help that, you hope, and we all hope. But really, with you said there high rates of sickness absence, so that's what's flagged that with me. How are you managing that, and how are you managing to understand what the underlying problems are? What are they then, please? Thank you.
So some of the things that we're doing to address the issues around the experience of people working within a local authority or the wider sector. So internally, we'll look at our feedback mechanisms from our practitioners. So that could be through exit interviews, stay interviews. It's through our workforce surveys, and we identify some key areas that may be impacting on their ability to do the best that they possibly can do in their role for the people of Lincolnshire. So this year I think we had the highest rate of response ever, and we pulled out some key themes, and we've gone and done direct work with the workforce to really understand what could support them. One of the areas was very much around the offer we have around health and wellbeing. Actually, how do we make sure people understand what that is? We know it's an award-winning offer at a national level, but actually how do we ensure that people are accessing that, understand what's available? We have seen across Lincolnshire, I think as I said, we had some additional data come out in I think it was the last week, wasn't it, from Skills for Care, that does show a reduction in terms of the number of vacancies across the county, across social care, despite an increase in the number of posts. But it's an area that we need to keep laser focus on and keep talking to our teams and understanding what their experience is for them. I think there's some fantastic opportunities to think about how we can support people through flexible working. I think we've talked a bit about the learning and development offer that comes up high for people. They talk about having good experience in relation to that. But how do we support people to progress through the career as well? So there are a number of key themes that have come out of that work when we will need to keep working on it. I don't know, Melanie, if you wanted to add.
I think most of the care in the county is provided by small and medium-sized organisations who can't do occupational health on their own and can't do wellbeing on their own. During COVID, we did it together, and then in the previous government, occupational health was going to be done nationally for the care sector. That's likely to be part of the National Care Service, but I don't think we can wait for that. So that is one of the things that we will be talking to Martin about when he gets back from leave, to say, I think we need to look at, can we do an occupational health and wellbeing offer that providers could buy into? Because I think some providers are wasting an awful lot of money buying from slick commercial offers that don't really do anything. But we've got a fabulous health service that could support us, and I don't think we can afford to wait for the National Care Service. We know what we want to do, and I don't think it will be in opposition to anything that comes out nationally. So I think we just need to get on with it, because you're right, and I do think we need to recognise the damage that COVID did to our workforce. Absolutely. And I think most of them are just carrying on, but there's no reserves. So if they're ill, they're ill. And then they come to work when they shouldn't be coming to work because there's no sick pay. And it does ultimately, Councillor Lee's right, it goes down to pay. If you're well paid, then you can afford to do your own well-being things. If you're only just paying the bills, you can't go to the gym or the swimming pool or whatever else it is. But in the absence of a fair pay agreement, we will carry on, I think, and hoping with our public health colleagues. We've done it before. We just need to say it's not going to come from national government, so we'll do it ourselves.
Councillor Whittington.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks very much indeed for the report. Very interesting. I speak a little bit from not personal experience, but certainly in the case of my wife, who's several years past retirement age, who still works as a care worker in the care sector. But she has got the flexibility, and I think that's important, because she was sort of saying that amongst most of her colleagues, the vast majority of them are over 50. They struggle to retain young people because they come in and after a while they find they can earn more working at Tesco or wherever. So they go. I think the training is important, because certainly my wife didn't start her MVQs until she was, until after she retired, and she got up to NVQ level 3. So I think the training is important, but again, it was mainly the elderly, the older members of the workforce who were taking advantage of the opportunity that the company was providing. So I think that's a real issue. I mean, the company my wife was working for sort of does stop providing care, and my wife is now working. She's got all her insurance and everything. She's now working, self-employed, but she's able to pick and choose the clients she wants around the village where we live, and she's built up a nice little. So for her it works, but the points I think that everybody's making, and I think the pay thing is really really important as well, because if we are paying people minimum wage or just above, they're going to be potentially sucked off elsewhere, whether it's to supermarkets or into other opportunities. I mean, obviously, what the care sector needs is a big injection of cash. I'm not quite sure where that's going to come from. When you sort of consider I think now, probably nearly half of the entire LCC budget goes on adult social care. It's very difficult to see where that large injection of cash is going to come from. So, as I say, I think just really echoing the sort of comments that everybody else has made, really, and you know, it's such a vitally important job, but I think it's been undervalued for far too long, and I think offering the apprenticeships and making it a career for people is the way forward. But other careers offer that as you develop and as you work your way up, you get paid for it. And again, it comes back to that question of I can't see where the pay's going to come from. And I think that's why really the message is adult social care needs more cash. I think governments have, well, it's difficult to say. So I mean, the previous government, the can got kicked down the road. I'm not entirely sure what the new government's view is in terms of cash, but without the money and without the investment, I can't really see how we can go to where we want to go, which is to provide a proper career structure. Thank you.
I totally agree with you. It does need more funding. I think one of the places we can look for that, though, trying to be positive, is that as we move to better trained staff and more recognised competencies, we are beginning to support the NHS in a better way, and maybe there's the opportunity there to shift some resources. I know our community nursing team still employs a lot of agency nurses. Some of those tasks could be done within the care home setting, which we are working on with the ICS. But historically, the resources haven't moved, and they have to move, because I don't think there is going to be an injection of cash. I'm hoping to be proved wrong, but I don't think there will be. And we do have to use our digital resources. And one of the things we're trying to do with the local authorities, like the reviews, is where are there places where we can save money by being more productive together? We've all done the productivity in our own organisations. An example would be that the Better Homes initiative that's just been started. There was a potential that we were going to employ lots more housing officers to go and check homes. And I said, but we've got 8,000 home care workers. Just train us to tell us what we're looking for, and we can be that referral route. And I think we are very lucky in Lincolnshire that I can have that conversation and say, is that possible? Can we do that? Can we save some money together and then share it better? Because I think if we wait for national government to inject a lot of money in, I don't think the new government quite understands social care yet. They see us in relation to the NHS, but I don't get the impression that they actually understand the difference that good social care makes to people's lives.
Councillor Overton.
Thank you, that's great. Like previous speakers, I also really appreciate what you've been saying today. I think you've been speaking really good sense, much appreciated and very well explained. So thank you for that. One thing I wanted to pick up was about workers coming from abroad, and I know that people are not always that keen on that. But if we have got a problem, and we do have people coming into the country, increasing numbers now, who do have the right to work, and obviously, as you know, the government is aiming to speed that up, so that there'll be more coming through who can work or be sent back and not sitting in limbo. So I'm wondering, I actually met a care worker who told me that she'd been recruited, she and her sister had been recruited in Zimbabwe, and she's really nice, she's working really hard, I'm very appreciative of that. And I don't know how much of the problem that we've got now has been supported by that policy, and how much you think that might have an increasing influence in the future.
Thank you. Well, Lincolnshire leads the East Midlands International Recruitment Project. So we although we don't have very many people, we've got our fingers in the pies, if you like. And I think, yes, there are some fabulous care workers that have come. The particular good route to pick them up is people who have come to University of Lincoln to do a master's degree. I think I've got 4 people who've got a master's in public health from Central Africa. They want to do 5 years here, learning about how we work, and then they will go home and they will do public health back at home, but they've got that different experience. There are also people from India has a deliberate policy they've got too many young people and we've got not enough young people. So there are bilateral arrangements for them to come over here. Councillor Overton, and we're not going to have lots because Lincolnshire is not that kind of place, but the ones that come are so committed, because to give up your, to pack up your home and come halfway around the world, you do have to be committed. They have the right skills. They need more onboarding because we're a strange place to come and live in. And sadly, they can't access any of the funded training opportunities. You can't be an apprentice until you've been here for 3 years. You can't go to college till you've been here for 3 years. So that is a problem. But I do think health and care has become a global career. Our newly qualified nurses and doctors go to live in Australia and Canada, and why wouldn't you? And if they're going to do that, then we need to recruit on a proper, systematic way. Maybe not from Africa because they've not got enough and they don't like us taking their staff. But certainly in India they do. They could come and work in care for a few years and then maybe go into the health service. So I do think that is I think it's something we need to embrace and be thankful for and proud of, because certainly in my own organisation, I've got a number of overseas staff, and 10 years ago I would never have dreamt of recruiting internationally. And they are absolutely fabulous. They will work wherever, whenever, and they see care as a privilege, which sadly, and we as parents looking around the room of the age, we've not brought our young people up to see that. But they still do. So I think that it's going to be something we stay with, I think.
Thank you.
I do have a list, so don't worry, nobody's missed off. So Councillor Sear is next.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I used to work in care sector 30 years ago, but not in this area. From my experience is Lincoln is rural area. Some of my neighbor years ago, they come out from hospital and he need the care packet. Hard to get anybody out to come and see her husband. They got to have somebody come from Lincoln to go to Sutherthorpe. That is an issue, right? Another thing is, I am qualified NVQ 3 years ago, so I know how a system works. And they got some agency come in, and the agency get paid more than, all the same, you got agency nurse, you get paid more. And how some of my colleagues, my friend now, retired and left, and they say reason why they left the care sector because it to do with paperwork. When I got changed to have NVQ, and the company pay for it, but you got to work so many years before you can leave. That's good enough. I think how to target it, you have to see. Lots of my friends from Thai lady who live in this country, they don't like to work in Thai restaurant. They don't want to work in supermarket. They want to work in the care home. How can you recruit these people to become, the job, you got to love it. It's a rewarding, I love it. But if for me, it's too many paperwork, you not deliver the care what you believe in. But when you go to the client, you got to do these paper, you travel from Lincoln to Sutherthorpe or Mablethorpe. You allow half an hour to see a client and you travel about an hour. It didn't work. Somehow we got to try to target it. You know, plenty care want to do it, but, you know, it is the issue. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I do think our rural county does make it challenging, but I think the way the council commissions home care now by zone is you shouldn't be travelling from Lincoln to Mablethorpe, not unless we're in a crisis. And yes, in a crisis you might be, but I think you've just said something that's really struck me. I don't think we do reach out to the settled community from people from Thailand, the Philippines, who might actually want to do a part-time job in care. So I'm going to take that away and make sure that we add that to our attraction strategy. So thank you very much for that one.
Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I found it a very interesting and informative presentation. Thanks very much. Obviously, pay is a crucial issue, but another thing that always occurs to me is recognition. I know you have the Lincolnshire Care Awards. What extent of take-up do you have as regards people engaging in that? Because I think recognition is so very important in any occupation, and public recognition particularly, to raise the profile of the profession. So what sort of level of engagement do you have?
I think we've had just under 300 nominations this year, which is really thrilling. I think we do have a good spread of small homes, large homes. We have some really good support from our councillor colleagues. We have a thing called a Rising Star. And if you get nominated for that, you have to have been in the sector for less than 3 years. Nomination automatically makes you a finalist. They come and spend an afternoon having afternoon tea at the college and doing silly games that we shows of their leadership. Councillor Sneath usually comes and gives out the certificates. And I think that matters because it's a public recognition. Sadly, we really struggle to get press coverage because it's not a scandal, it's not about a bad care home, it's about a good care home. But we are lucky in that the district councils provide venues for us to do the judging, so they get to see what's going on. The staff get their photograph taken, and it's not expensive, except in terms of time. And we are very grateful for officers, councillors, and provider execs who put their time in. But absolutely, recognition really, really matters. And we've got a couple of ambassador schemes. You can be a safeguarding ambassador. You can be a swallowing oral health and nutrition ambassador. And they get a lanyard so that everybody at work can see that that's what they are. And I think it's little things like that that don't cost a fortune, but do make a difference. And we are eternally grateful to our local authority, public health and NHS colleagues for buying the lanyards and providing the training.
Just to build on what Melanie said, I think you're absolutely right. It's the small things, and it's a culture of celebrating success. We have two people, well, actually a team and a social worker individually that have been nominated for the Social Worker of the Year Awards, and have been shortlisted to go to the event in London. So it's fantastic, great coverage, and it really supports us with our recruitment as well, of bringing people into the sector and shining a light on Lincolnshire. Actually, one of those people started working at a care provider, and we're using that story in our recruitment activity as well to say, actually, this is a career path potentially for you. The other thing we do as well within the council is to recognise those that support people. So we have over 50 apprentices at any one time, or this year, but the amount of support those people need around them to be successful and to be the best they can be, we have some really dedicated people within the organisation. Perhaps those people that are more experienced support them to be able to undertake the apprenticeships as well. So there are a number of things we're doing internally, and I know we're linking in with Melanie externally as well. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Clark.
Thank you for that, Callum. Thank you again. And I just wanted to pick up on something that you said about overlapping of work, types of work, about housing adaptations. I think you're absolutely right. I want to thank you for your common sense speech today, because quite frankly, that has been such a pleasure to hear somebody say, this is what we need, this is what we want to do, this is what we're going to ask Martin for, this is how we need to move forward. Thank you, because that really makes it easier for us, and then we can say, right, you really want to move forward. But I think you're absolutely right about the cash injection. Don't wait for it. You've got to start asking and adapting how you want your business. Now, it is a business, after all. It's got to move forward. But the housing adaptations, I think, yeah, where you can overlap, go for it. And I think as well, if you can get the recruitment and retention right at the beginning, you've mentioned about the skills and the professionalising of it, and we all agree with that. But you also said privilege. about people who are looking at it's a privilege to do it, and those things need to be in there right at the beginning, because it's not just about those training skills that you need to do this the right way. It's about listening skills. It's about recognising when somebody is lonely. It's about being able to think, ooh, that's not quite right, I need to flag that with somebody else. So all of those things, I think, are going to help uplift and professionalise the job, because you're going to expand on it, and it's such a pleasure that you've said all of those things. I wish you well, and I hope that you can make the progress that you need this year. Thank you.
And finally, Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for indulging me. I just wanted to pick up on a few things. First of all, I'm really glad that LCC are supportive of your expertise, because that's exactly what it is. It shines out from everything that you said. It's your expertise, and I'm glad that you're the ones that do the choosing of what happens and where, etc. I wanted to go back to some of the comments about diversity in workforces, and I appreciate that I'm in a healthcare environment and not a social care, but they're not dissimilar. I would say on the hospital ward where I work, which is an acute cardiac ward, that at least half of the staff are what we call international nurses, men and women who have come over from India. And I absolutely take my hat off to them. There are all the things that you say about being dedicated and professional, but you put on top of that, they've come from a different kind of work environment in India. It's a different language. Everything is different about it, and many are young working parents. I'd say more are than aren't. So they're juggling all those things and doing a really good job into the bargain. So the first person that has one of those nasty flags saying send immigrants back, I'd tackle them any day, because I'll tell you what, without them, our health and social care services wouldn't run anymore. They're absolutely wonderful. To agency staff were mentioned. Again, without agency staff, hospitals, I don't know about social care, but hospitals wouldn't run, because we had public sector pay freezes for, I lost count of how many years, and nurses left because of that. And agency staff fill those gaps. And if we didn't have agency staff, there's some wards that you just wouldn't be able to open them because it wouldn't be safe. You've got to have agency staff, and I agree. I don't like seeing them getting paid X times as much as I'm getting paid, but I tell you what, I'm glad that they're there to look after some of the patients, because we wouldn't manage without them. Paperwork. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors around paperwork, because I don't particularly like having to do it. But for me, the stuff that you have to do is you have to perform regular skin checks on patients. You have to perform checks on things like catheters once a day, skin checks, it depends on, you do risk assessments, more paperwork, you do falls risk, you've got to check them every so often. But you know what, if something went wrong and someone had really bad pressure damage or fell, you'd have to look at the documentation to go back to see at what point that went wrong. And if that documentation hadn't have been done, you'd never be able to identify it. So I do understand the need for paperwork, and yeah, it is a pain. And yes, I do often end up staying half an hour late to make sure that actually my other documentation's done, because I spent all day doing the checks and delivering care. But it's essential, because you can't identify where things go wrong if you don't document it. If it isn't written down, it isn't done. That's what we always say. And finally, I think it was Marianne, somebody said about being a privilege. No, it was Nikki, about being a privilege. I've been where I work for 21 years, and it's been a huge privilege. It's like a second family to me, and I shall cry on Saturday when I go. I feel like crying now thinking about it, but it's a massive privilege that people trust you to look after their loved ones, and I think everything that's been said is absolutely true. Thank you. I'm sorry as well if I've been too gushing about this, but it's how I really feel. Thank you.
If you'd like to respond to any points, and then sort of summary.
I think paperwork, yes, it is a pain, but it is essential. And I think the amount of paperwork demonstrates the complexity of people that are being cared for in their own home by people who don't work for the NHS. And if my care staff don't know how to write the paperwork in the way that the district nurse can read, then the district nurse will have to come in more often. So unfortunately, paperwork is here to stay. We'd like to make it digital, but that doesn't always work in this wonderful county of ours, because you can't read the care plan on your phone because the signal's not working. But I do think it also demonstrates that a lot of our young people aren't comfortable writing, and maybe that's an area that we need to focus on. But you're absolutely right, Councillor Lee. If we don't write it down, it didn't happen. We have a regulator that is not fit for purpose according to everybody that knows, decided yesterday. So actually I think that means that you take more care of your paperwork, because if nobody is coming in to check it, you have to make sure as an organisation that it's right. Paper. What I don't think we always do with our care staff now, when we do our do our time assessments, I'm not sure we recognise quite how much we ask them to write down, particularly with a deteriorating individual, that we didn't do 10 years ago, because I'd like to guess it's not on the resource allocation list. How long does it take to record all that stuff? So maybe we need to look at that. But thank you.
Well, firstly, on behalf of the committee, can I thank you both for the breadth and depth of your knowledge and expertise, and I think you've certainly provided us all with assurance here today, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of us all to wish you well with the year ahead. So thank you, and we'll come on to so in terms of the proposal of the report, so I'm happy to propose that the committee record its support for the progress and developments being made to meet the challenges of recruiting and retaining adult social care staff. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sear, and all those in favour, please do indicate. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. You are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but I do understand if you wish to disappear. Thank you. Therefore, we will move on to agenda item number 6, which is the housing-related support recommissioning. This item is found on pages 25 to 70 of our pack. And on the 5th of November, the County Council's executive is due to make a decision on a 1-year extension of the contract for the housing-related support service. And I believe we have Anne-Marie, Carl and Amy here to present to us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So just to remind the committee of this service, so our housing-related support service, this offers short-term support of up to 6 months to vulnerable adults with substance misuse and or mental health concerns who are either homeless or are threatened with homelessness. The service helps them to deal with the issues which led to their current situation and to develop the skills they need to live independently. The service is delivered through 2 methods: floating support, which is in the person's own home where their tenancy is at risk, and accommodation based for those who are homeless. The accommodation costs are not part of the contract and are met by the provider, usually through housing benefit. Provision is county-wide and can support 323 people at any one time. The current service performs well in supporting people to meet their outcomes. However, due to lack of suitable move-on accommodation, there can be delays in moving people on in a timely way at the end of their period of support. There's no statutory duty on the council to provide this service. However, it does support the discharge of duties such as those under the Care Act to provide services that help prevent or delay needs for care and support. Nationally and both locally, data shows us that the system costs of homelessness are most strongly experienced by other organisations, and that others such as district councils and health bodies potentially gain a financial benefit from the service, but they don't currently contribute to the provision and cost. There's currently no local evidence of the financial impacts of housing-related support on partners, and the benefits need to be further understood and attributed in Lincolnshire. So the current contract ends in September 2025, with all available extensions having already been taken. The current budget is £2.2 million a year, and this includes a 10% increase in the original budget, which recognised inflationary pressures associated with the national living wage, and this is met by the Public Health Grant Reserve. The provider is forecasting that the cost for 2025 will exceed the contract amount. In addition to this, for future recommissioning, we're also expecting a reduced budget to reflect removal of that non-recurring funding from the Public Health Grant Reserve and the reallocation of some elements of funding to support our statutory function to young people in the leaving care service. So a combination of increasing delivery costs and demand and future budget reduction have obviously necessitated the need for us to explore future options for this service. A key factor is understanding those benefits to our other partners and attributing those and engaging with those individuals. In addition to that, we haven't yet received the government's overarching strategy for homelessness, and the future funding allocations of this area aren't clear. So this creates a challenge for both LCC and potential co-funders such as district councils. However, the recommendation to extend the current service by 12 months will allow time for us to hopefully receive that information from government, understand the future intent and confirm and engage with district councils around the benefits of the service and their willingness to participate in funding that for the future. I'll hand over to Carl to just cover the commercial aspects.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Just to cover off the commercial implications, then first of all, in the context of the procurement and legal aspects, the relevant legislation here, the Public Contract Regulations 2015, do permit the extension of contracts by direct award without needing to undertake a competitive process where certain criteria are met, and in this case the circumstances are considered to meet the relevant criteria for it to be a non-substantial modification and therefore permissible under the regulations. So, that being the case, if the recommendation is supported, it represents a low risk in procurement terms. Secondly, in relation to the extension process itself, we have entered into discussions with the current provider who, as Anne-Marie has said, had already indicated that the current budget is insufficient to support the continued delivery of the current model, primarily due to inflationary pressures, and predominantly that's wage inflation. So it will be necessary to make some adjustments to the scope of the service to sustain service delivery within the £2.2 million budget for the remainder of the current contract year and the extension period. The provider has confirmed its willingness to work with us to extend the contract should we confirm that that is how we wish to proceed, and also subject to the agreement of suitable adjustments to enable that continued delivery within the contract price. They have also confirmed their commitment to work with us to finalise the scope of any adjustments as quickly as possible, with the aim of maintaining maximum service impact through the remainder of the current contract year and the extension period. We are in the process of considering preliminary proposals. Those discussions are ongoing, and with the preferred approach being to focus any necessary adjustments on revisions to service volume expectations in order to ensure that the nature of service delivery and therefore the impacts and benefits for service recipients, for commissioners and for the wider health and care sector remain consistent with the original purpose, the original intent and the original outcomes of the contract, and that will in turn support then the work that's needed during the next 12 months to more fully quantify and qualify those benefits and impacts of the service, to better inform decisions about future funding and future commissioning of housing related support services for adults at the end of 2025. Thank you.
Super. Well, I've got a few questions, so I'll start first then. So when you were just talking about service delivery, so in terms of the financial constraints we find ourselves in, what measures are in place to ensure that the reduction in service scope does not disproportionately affect the most vulnerable population, particularly care leavers and individuals with severe mental health issues?
So the service currently has some provision in it to allow care leavers priority access into the service, so that remains. In transferring some of the funding across to our care leavers service in the future, that puts some dedicated provision into that service as well to support those individuals. In terms of other elements that relate to ongoing need there, we have a triage process that's in place, so anybody that's referred into the service is triaged and a score attributed to make sure that those that are in most need have first access into the service.
Just obviously again around funding, and I suppose it's what progress, if any, has been made in terms of engaging district councils and NHS partners to co-fund the housing related support scheme, especially considering the growing demand for mental health and substance abuse, especially linked to housing instability.
So we've had some initial conversations with partners, including districts, and at the moment districts are in a position where they're currently awaiting their funding allocations. Over the previous number of years, there have been a number of grants to district councils to support homelessness work. At the moment, they haven't had confirmation if those grants will continue or the level of funding. So at the moment, we're just in a position where we need that period of time to have this clarity and to understand what those future funding opportunities may be.
And then final question for me, and then I'll open up to the floor. So in terms of cost-benefit analysis now, and we've sort of picked up on this, but with the anticipated rise in homelessness and demand for services, how is this council measuring the long-term cost savings of this preventative service, particularly in reducing pressure on statutory services like adult social care and mental health interventions?
So we've done some initial work, but only looking at a very small sample of people that have used the housing related support service. And we have seen some indications, although at low numbers, that the service does support people that have been through the service and then have a much reduced need for adult social care or don't have any at all, certainly in the short term. So we have seen that in the small numbers that we have already looked at. We need to expand that out. And we do need to look more broadly at the cost benefit, particularly to LCC and adult social care, and as we've said, where those other benefits lie, and the benefits to the districts and health.
I think, Derek, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Cook. I think it's a really important question. What we are trying to do with this service and a lot of the preventative services is to stop bad things happening. And to demonstrate that we have stopped negative outcomes is really quite difficult because they don't happen. And we have a health and care system that predominantly deals with the consequences of bad things happening. And that's always a challenge within the public health and preventative services sphere. You know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Everybody nods and agrees. But when we have direct requirements from people who need support, whether that's coming through A&E or whether that's individuals who are homeless, it's hard to shift. We've done quite a lot of modelling, quite a lot of analysis, but it is always that issue of this is our best analysis and estimate of what will happen if we stop. Obviously, the proof of the pudding will be if we do stop, what does happen. And of course, we don't want to get to that position if we can avoid it. But given the lack of clarity about national policy position, the time that we've already started in conversations with our NHS and district council colleagues, but the more time that's needed to do that, this seems the most sensible option in terms of giving us the space to do that, to do further analysis and to hopefully understand a different policy position with the government that will focus on some of the preventative services, not just dealing with people who are coming through the door, because we know that's unsustainable.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I think this report's shocking, absolutely shocking. I read it, and page 32 talks about the average age of death being around 30, and as well as that, the increase between the increase in the number of homelessness. In England, it was 46%, and in Lincolnshire, it's 94% between 2020 and 22. I just think that they're really, really shocking statistics. Yesterday I did the online citizens advice session between 1 and 2. They were talking about what they would be asking the Labour government for in the budget. I think they might be out of luck with some of it, but they were talking about there's actually been a sustained increase, hasn't there, over the last year in homelessness. And I was in London last week, and it's really noticeable that there's more people on the streets. So I think this report makes shocking readings. Whatever the reasons are for that, it's shocking, this report. I take issue with the comments about districts don't contribute. That probably is factual, but I think when you compare the district budgets with the county budgets, I think we're all in dire straits. Local authority budgets have been cut for years, but let's be honest here, the district budgets are smaller to start with, so they're probably not in the same position to contribute. I don't think it's about cost savings, it's about humanity. And I would draw attention to the fact that LCC spend huge sums on highways. I didn't attend September's council because I wasn't at home, but I understand we had about a 9 million underspend. And this is, what is it, about 2.5 million, even with the increase we're asking for. And I'm sorry, but would I rather spend money on mending potholes and paths or saving people's lives who are living on the street? Well, I know which choice I'd make. And I know that's emotive language, but it is a fact and it is the truth. I think this money is money very well spent, and I would hope that anyone with an ounce of humanity would support what's in this report and support spending more money on it, actually. And thank you for a really informative report, and thank you for all the work that you do. It is appreciated. Personally, I think we could do much more, but I appreciate what you do with the money that we allocate to it. Thank you.
Happy to offer, if anyone would like to respond, we'll go to the next. No. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Listen to the report. I mean, I think it's really important that we do try to understand, if we can possibly quantify what the impact of what we do has on both the NHS and district councils as well, because one thing we do at LCC really well across adult and children's social care is we do early intervention stuff really, really well, which prevents or reduces the impact of problems further down the line. And again, it then helps us to make our case that when we are negotiating or talking with both the health service and district council, say, look, you know, we've quantified this, and we think. I mean, are there any sort of metrics that you can identify or use to try to work out what the financial impact is in terms of, in effect, we're absorbing the costs to keep it, and you know, it's to identify what level of contribution we could be talking to the health service and district and district councils about, because it's, you know, I think it's really important that I think that this is a really, really vital service, and it would be very, very unfortunate if the funding levels went down, the service provision went down, because I think, as Councillor Lee has just made the point, the actual demand for this service is increasing and is likely to carry on increasing. So I mean, I'm supportive of us spending on this, but also if you know, if we could manage to identify the impact and to say to both the health service and the district councils, you know, look, you know, this is a really, really important service. It's important that it's fully funded, but we need some help and support on this. And I know the health service has got its own funding issues, and I know district councils have got their own funding issues as well. I worked as an accountant in both the health service and local government for nearly 40 years, and it is the case certainly in local government. We've been asked to do more and more for less for a very, very long time now. But just something around that aspect of it, because I think that's really important, that we do try and quantify a case so we can take it to our colleagues in the health service and district councils. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Whittington. Yes, we're certainly in the process of doing that work. We know currently, based on the current contract value, our allocations across the county were based on need at the time that the current contract was let. So we know how many units are in each area. So we have been able to give districts an indication based on the current contract of what that split looks like across the county and how that would quite crudely be allocated out in terms of cost at the moment. I think the other point we're working through with district councils, obviously they have a responsibility for homelessness and to prevent and relieve homelessness. This service is around providing the wraparound support, and although it has an accommodation element to it, that isn't fundamentally part of the contract. So we're also exploring with our districts the prevention element, what would have happened to some of the individuals that came into the service if that service wasn't there, and what would have the district done to have support that individual. So we can try and more thoroughly understand the system costs associated with this.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got loads to say on this, and I'm going to dot about all over the auction, so apologies if that's the case, and I'll try and keep it as focused as possible. So, a declaration, housing is my portfolio from a district point of view as well, as is homelessness. So this was even more a particular interest for me. So, I agree, absolutely, we need to extend the contract for another year. I would question why so many times in the report we're saying we haven't got the time yet, we need more time to be looking at it. This contract's been in place since 2020. Why weren't we measuring all of this actually in the first place? Why are we leaving it until now? We should have been understanding, is it value for money? What is the cost per person? What's the outcomes for the person? This isn't, as Karen said, sorry, Councillor Lee, has said, this is about people, this isn't about money. I feel the paper is very, very slanted towards saying, hey districts, hey NHS, you need to be paying towards this. And it doesn't feel it's interested in the people that's at the heart of this. So for me, have we been looking at the data to say, what about those repeat cohort? Those ones that I would imagine every single one of us as councillors know in our area, there's that 5 or 6 people that go through the system. And basically the help that is there by this and by anything else that's provided at the minute is not enough. So they are going to be that continual cycle that we get to the point where certainly in my area frameworks say they're too complex. So therefore they've not got that place. So what are those, where is this person now? Just keep falling through the cracks and being problems, whether it's shoplifting, drugs, attacks, suicide for themselves, all of these. So for us, we need to be looking at the data that tells us about those gaps and looking at the new service to start being something about that, rather than us focus on the money. 2 million for a budget of our size is almost embarrassing that we're focused on that personally. So the other things that the new contract for me really needs to be looking at is that data sharing, is actually using it. So when we've got framework and we've got the district councils and any other person, for example, Double Impact or We Are With You will say you've got a drug appointment at 10 o'clock Wednesday. All of those teams, the housing, all of those teams need to be going. Don't forget, you've got your 10 o'clock there. So they're sharing the data. They're setting these up as actual reasons to work together because there has to be parameters. There has to be giving people skills. At the minute, what framework often do is so much hand-holding. It's not giving the people the skills to later be able to do the forms or whatever themselves. What we need in Lincolnshire, in my opinion anyway, is tiers. At the minute, you've got a bit of support, you break the rules and you're out. What we need is the tiers that people can move up and down. And if that means we need a county-wide, almost like, the Celebs Priory Centre, where literally people go and you give up your phone and everything, and it's pretty strict, and you move up and down these systems. Because at the minute you breach with framework or whoever, you're out. then they're back to the homeless again and going through the cycle. So the whole contract needs to be re-looked at drastically in a very different way. Derek, I don't believe that this is a preventative service. It's a consequential service, in my opinion, which I think it is very much measurable, the outcomes of it. We have not been looking for the outcomes. The KPIs that's measured on framework, they're service-led. They're not telling us anything, to be honest with you. How many people have used support services or registered? How many have got a plan? 90%, 95%. The figures look great. Are the results actually telling us the same thing? I would suggest possibly not. The other thing I need to understand is the uplift of 522. Have we challenged that? Have we gone back to understand that? Because that seems ridiculously excessive for just staff costs for it to have gone up by that amount. So I would question as to where that comes from. And the other staff cost element that I'd like to understand is how their users are actually charged service charges, which pays towards the staff costs as part of housing benefit and other benefits. It becomes as an additional service charge. So actually our LCC paying for the staff costs and also the tenant paying for the staff costs, are they getting double bubble there? And finally, in regards to, again, framework are part of the new Links Recovery Partnership. So again, are we kind of paying double on this? Because actually as some of that support services, be it whether it's floating or whether it's residential, is some of that including some of that what should be part of the recovery partnership work. So we're potentially being charged twice on that as well. I could go on, I'm not going to. Thank you.
I'll hand over to the team to respond.
Okay, I'll pick those up for you. So yes, we do gather outcomes from the individuals, and they are supported in terms of the information we have. What we haven't done in the past is attribute costs across other areas. That's the piece of work that we've not done, but we're very clear on the outcomes. Our actual return rate of people that come back into the service that have already been through is relatively low. So we're not seeing large quotas of people that come out and back in. Some do go back in, but it is smaller numbers. And we do have to accept that ultimately this service is not there for people with very high level needs. That's not what the support is about. So there are times when the behaviour of the individuals is beyond what we can reasonably expect the service provider to deal with, and on those occasions people do have to leave the service before that support has ended. But of course that's reflected in the nature of what this contract is there to provide. The workers that support this, they are not specialist workers, so they will support the person to access our other commission services. You referred to the drug and alcohol service and others where they can get that specialist support. But what it does provide for them is a stable base for them to receive and engage in that support, rather than actually doubling up on what is actually provided there. In relation to housing benefit, the contract doesn't pay any housing related costs for the service, but because of the type of accommodation it is, they are able to access a higher rate of housing benefit. But that is not part of the contractual arrangement that we have, and doesn't pay for the support that the individuals receive to engage with them. I question that, and I would challenge that, and I would like that to be looked into further, because the service charge is it's not a housing, it's an additional, but it isn't on a full normal housing benefit rate. So if there is an additional amount that can be coming in from that, then actually that's still an additional charge that I do still believe is going to support some of the staffing costs. So if we can just double check on that would be great. I take your point in regards to the small return, and they aren't, in-depth staff, but there can also be some selective taking of people, which also can assist figures, shall we say.
And why are we not speaking to others? Why are we only speaking to the current provider at the minute? Maybe we should be speaking a bit wider on that. Thank you.
Yeah, just really interesting and important points. We'll make sure we unpick some of those within the contract and try and provide that evidence, certainly from the contractual perspective at least. I think just coming back to the point about, is this a preventative service? I guess it's a language thing. In the world of public health, I would say this is secondary and tertiary prevention. These are some of the most complex, chaotic people that we have in the county, and helping them to maintain accommodation that then feeds into their ability to receive other services, whether they're NHS services or whether they are completing substance misuse services, is a way to stop them, obviously, one, falling into homelessness, and then two, all of the additional challenges that will give. On page 32, Crisis have estimated some of the costs around this. And it shows the breadth of challenge if people are homeless. So I think, as I said, in my language, this is more about people who've already got existing challenging behaviours, often because of both mental health and substance misuse issues. How do we help them maintain a tenancy so that the wider system can support that individual? With the end point being, and as Anne-Marie said, we do capture this, and we can certainly build it into future papers for scrutiny, the story that they get in terms of breaking their addictions, dealing with their mental health challenges, and then being able to maintain their own tenancy, get back into work, and which is what everybody wants. We do have those stories. We haven't put them in here, but we'd be happy to pull that together for you.
Councillor Clark first.
Thank you, Chairman. I notice on page 29 you list your current providers and partnership working, and I'm just wondering, because I know there's a certain number of veterans get involved with homelessness. I wondered whether you'd ever worked with the Royal British Legion, in that they're quite adept at helping veterans. Obviously, accommodation seems to be the criteria to help this, and I'm wondering whether within our portfolio of buildings that we're trying to get rid of, that there's any suitable accommodation or that could be turned to accommodation, whether that could be worked with another partner, that they would take on and run that building once it was adapted. Thank you.
So the current provider doesn't have a problem sourcing accommodation. So we do have a supply of that within the contract. Certainly veterans are one of the cohorts that we specifically look at in terms of them accessing the service, and we do have a small number of veterans that do come through the service. I think in terms of future provision, I can let Carl comment, but this is a commission service, so we do put that out to open tender. The current provider does work with several other partners to provide that, so Framework don't deliver it alone. They work with NACRO and others, so it would certainly be open to providers that wish to form similar partnerships with other groups, such as the British Legion, if they have accommodation.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I listened with interest to my colleague sat next to me. You can call me Carol, by the way, I don't mind. I listened with interest because I think her comment about that haggling over the money is frankly embarrassing given the size of Lincolnshire County Council's budgets. If you look at Appendix B on page 42, the options appraisals, there are 3 different options that committee are told that we can recommend, but actually we're a scrutiny committee and we don't have to be bound by that. We can actually recommend what we want to recommend. That's what scrutiny is about. And I'm going to propose a 4th option. And my option would be, going back to page 31.32b, it talks about the cost of the service going forward as actually to keep it at what it is now would be just under 7,725,000. Well, you know where I'm coming from, don't you? Just over the 7 million. Anyway, I want to propose that this committee recommend to the exec that we actually, the LCC, meet that increased cost. I'd like it to be noted for the record, please, Simon, that I've made that recommendation, that we meet the increased costs. I'd like committee to vote on it, and that vote to be noted for the record, because I think it's really important. And I think Tracy's point that, you know, we're haggling over this, when you think of the size of our budgets, and I would draw attention again to what we spend on potholes, which of course are important, but so is this, I would recommend that we meet that increased cost, and I would like committee to vote on that, because we can have an extra option. We don't have to go with what's in this paper. So I'd ask that we do that, please.
Oh, I don't think they'll ever get me chairing again, will they? Yes, I'm... yes, while Hugh goes away. I don't see why we can't. If you've got a seconder for that proposal.
Seconded, and I'd like to
and I think
speak
you want
as
to.
well.
I'll let you speak then, Councillor Overton.
Thank you very much. I do think we need to pay what's necessary when it is affordable, and we are in that situation now, according to the leaders' report on the web following the budget recently. So I'm assuming that that is correct. Just picking up some of the points, and I think this is what brings the points home, and I know it's been mentioned, but the numbers are horrendous here. 21.2 out of every 100,000 people in Boston are homeless, compared to a national average of 6.8. So we're three times the national. That's a lot. And the issue that I think we should also link this with asking the government for extra funds, or making sure that we have all the extra funds that are available. I had a meeting yesterday with Angela Eagle, and we were discussing the new people that are coming through to all of our areas, including Lincolnshire, and there are funds available when this is, when you have extra unforeseen burdens, there are extra funds there, and I think we need to make sure that we're onto it. And I think the second thing is that we have got two things that have hit us hard. One, as we know, is where the people who were in hotels came to the end of their contracts and then needed housing very urgently. And then we also had people released early from prison, sometimes with only 3 weeks' notice, who suddenly needed significant support. So those two extra burdens have arrived on our homelessness table. So I'm not sure that those have been taken into account in the figures given here. 16% rise expected by 2030. It might be higher than that if you take into account those two new government policies. The other point about this is that if some of this money has been given to a different department, has that properly been taken into account? I haven't quite got a grip with what the required funds are once you've taken children out of this budget because they go into another budget. So that it's not actually a reduced amount that we're spending, it's just that it's coming from a different department. So I think you'd need to take that into account. But certainly I want to support the proposal that we do fund what is needed because of the risks and the additional costs, risk to society, and the additional costs that are quoted in the paper. And it does point out that the additional costs here, as the officer just mentioned, the breakdown would be something like NHS 4,000, mental health 2,000, alcohol addiction and drug addiction 1,000, criminal justice and homelessness. All of those figures add up to the figures given earlier, which is £38,000 per person every year. So it is quite clear that this is important for the individuals, important for our society, important for the overall long-term funding. It's an invest to save, and it's vital to do. Thank you.
Any questions from officers? No?
Just to confirm regarding the leaving care service, yes, that does go to provide funding for posts within that service that support. So It's coming out of one service providing a similar support elsewhere, not identical but similar.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Crikey, this is such an emotive subject, isn't it? And I think that while we're strategy and policy, and that's what we're looking at, the human side of it is obviously impacting very much. Certainly with me, when I read the report, I too felt that, you know, small budget, it's embarrassing, scratching around, there's this, and now we're another 12 months, and you, my colleague here, mentioned time. I was going to ask, is that enough time, given the fact you've got delays from central government? My concern, my real concern here is that homelessness, with all the complexities that are attached to it, and we're trying to support in a way with a very small amount of money and hoping for a bit more of a buy-in from the districts who, quite rightly, have smaller budgets, they're doing the best they can, but homelessness is exploding, right? It's exploding. It has exploded across the whole country. Not just the country, the world. Homelessness is exploding. So actually preventative, I don't think is, while we've got all the complexities, we need to look at preventative around complexities for that. We need to stop it. So there needs to be ways of going back to central government, if it means talking to our MPs or whatever, to stop it. Because the impact is costing so much money, we can't help it sufficiently. So we'll be sitting here next year looking at a budget, a small budget, trying to help it. And actually, budgets have already been set. So money has already been set in our budget. We voted on that. I do think that you're right. I think we need to look at it and see if we can help it. But budgets have already been set. So we can't change that, because we voted on it. But we can look at it and say, can we make some adjustment? Can we do something to help this? Because we're all very concerned about it. We're concerned about the human side of it. It's the human impact of it here, but we are dealing with strategy and policy. Do we need to increase it for another 12 months? Yes, we do. Is there a possibility that we can look at making up that shortfall, even though our budgets have been set? I think we can ask that question. I think that's realistic enough. But stopping it, we need to look at stopping homelessness and helping those people and prevent that from happening, because it's exploding. It's becoming uncontrollable. So those are the questions now that are vital. Otherwise, you're just going to see more homeless and homeless people. I too was in London a couple of weeks ago. They're all in Hyde Park, camping. It's shocking. So it's not just a local problem. It's a country problem. It's here. We now need to do something quite drastic. So ask the question by all means. I think we should ask that question, can we help that budget? But budgets have been set. Thank you.
We'll just go to Derek first, Karen, and then you're next.
Just a point of clarification on the budget. So the current funding for this service comes out of the public health ring-fence grant. As you'll know, as all councils know, we're going through a budget setting process and the medium-term financial plan. So certainly whatever scrutiny wants to recommend to executive, that can be recognised and then built in if executive asks us to do so. So we absolutely at the moment are planning on a set budget, but we don't know what the public health ring-fence grant will be because we've not been told yet. Obviously, we've got the budget come in, we'll have the local government settlement, fingers crossed, around Christmas time, and that will then inform executive's decision, and as officers we can put in how we would spend the totality of the budget. So just a point of clarity, the budget is set for this year, but what we are talking about is an extension, and there's a lot of, as we said in the introduction, as Anne-Marie said in the introduction, there's a lot of different things we don't know yet, which is partly why an extension gives us some hopefully will give us some clarity from a policy and a budgetary perspective nationally, and how that relates to Lincolnshire. And then obviously it's a council decision about how that budget is distributed.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back as somebody who had to produce my first alternative budget last February, and it was pretty scary doing that. I do know that we have got contingency sums, and the extra £500,000, which sounds a lot of money, it's a drop in the ocean to the contingency funds that we've got. I hope Michelle's not listening to me now, but it's true. This committee, we've got no power to make it happen, but we can recommend that we not only meet the current amount, but at least for the next year, make up the extra £500,000 too. We can recommend that from scrutiny, and that is what I'm proposing and what Marianne has seconded. And I would like a vote on that, and I would like the vote recorded, please. Thank you.
If the committee's minded, we can have a vote to check how members are minded. We aren't a decision-making committee here, obviously, but we can provide comment today. So it's however the committee's minded, but it's not a recorded vote as such.
Chair, we can record who votes in favour.
I'd say this is a recorded meeting, so we can all see who's voted which way. Do we have any further comments on this? Councillor Whittington.
I'm going to have to speak now as the Exec Support Councillor for Finance, really to echo Derek Ward's comments. The budgets for this have been set for this year, so there really isn't a... I am...
Point of order, it's a scrutiny meeting. Thank you.
Well, I do have another role, so I am trying to help the committee by speaking about the budget, because I do think it's important, Councillor Overton, that is understood. Thank you. Yeah, the budgets have been set for this year. I'm only reiterating the point that the Director of Public Health has already made on this. We don't know what funding allocations are going to be available for next year, because that's going to be decided. That process will start with the Chancellor's statement at the end of the month. We won't know what level of funding we're going to get until probably just before Christmas. We're expecting that all we will be receiving is a simple rollover of this year's money into next year, because the government have intimated they do want to do a full review of local authority funding, which potentially is not going to be available probably until this time next year, which will be useful for us to have, because then we might have some idea going forward on the medium term as to what the level of funding is likely to be. But at the moment, it's very, very difficult to support increase in funding into a situation where we don't have clarity around what levels of funding we're going to be receiving in next financial year. We can make comments. I propose that we can make comments to the executive, asking them to sort of look into it. But in terms of quantifying sums, we're not in a position to do that. Thank you.
I mean, we all have the opportunity to speak, and there is the opportunity to make recommendations and comments. And obviously, we've had a recommendation which has been proposed and seconded, so we will have a vote on that. And then obviously...
Chair, point of order. I did make the point as well that we have contingency budgets.
Yes,
and £500,000 out of a contingency budget is a drop in the ocean. I'm sorry, it is. I know that. I put together an alternative budget last year. So it's not being entirely honest to say that we really haven't got that money, because we actually have.
Mr. Chairman, there's a point of order. I do not like being referred to as being dishonest, and I would like Councillor Lee to retract that comment. The implication is that I'm being dishonest, and I'm not.
No, I didn't mean that you were being dishonest. What I'm saying that the comment that we haven't got the money, I don't think that's strictly true. We have a contingency fund. I do apologise. I didn't mean that you personally were dishonest, but we do have a contingency fund, and it's a lot more than £500,000. Thank you.
Right, the way we're going to do this is I've got Councillor Carter, I've got Councillor Overton. We'll let you speak, and then we will vote on the recommendation proposed by Councillor Lee. And then obviously if that falls or it succeeds, then obviously we then proceed with the agenda. So Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a little bit sad that it's come down to sort of the conversations that are happening now. That first we said it was embarrassing that we was debating 2 million, and we're now about the 500. I actually think it's important that for the last year, that actually that we aren't expecting any negotiation or drop. So being honest, I think it's a fair point raised by Councillor Lee that we do kind of do the uplift for that, and obviously I fully appreciate budgets are set. I also fully appreciate there are contingencies everywhere, and obviously we are giving our views. We are sharing our views of this as a recommendation to the exec, and obviously if things aren't movable, aren't flexible, then that would mean that this whole meeting is pointless because our recommendations are irrelevant if everything's already been agreed and set. So I would like to think that that wouldn't always be the case. Having said that, I think our interest needs to be not about just the shortfall of that. Our interest needs to be, what does it look like going forwards? And that is, for me, the biggest interest. I hadn't took into account Marianne's point in regards to the prison, the early releases and things. So I think that's a really fair point that actually I hadn't actually put on my radar. So it could well have meant that there were some additional challenges for Framework and any of the other providers that do this kind of work. I think it's going to be a really tough year. I really do. Obviously, we know inflation is now starting to come down, and hopefully things will start to be better for people. But it is like Councillor Nicholas said, you know, it is a big issue, and this isn't a service we need to be looking to cut. We've got to be looking to do more with it and go forwards and support as many people as possible, because the impact is not just for them. The impact is for the towns. When there's shoplifting, when obviously people are homeless on the streets, there's suicides, there's everything, there's all of this harm to people, and actually the horrendous harm that happened to people when they are in their tents and stuff. I've seen stories of real in South Holland where someone's been stamped on and things like that. This is people. Whatever someone has or hasn't done in their past, they're people. So that has to be our focus. So yes, I am happy to support actually that our recommendation, or I will happily give my vote to that our recommendation is that we don't expect any reduction in that service for a year. But my ask is, let's look forwards to make it much better than what we are giving right now. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Overton.
Thank you. Actually, I think Councillor Carter's spoken extremely well. I just wanted to pick up the issue about this is about people, and we are all agreed that it's important and that this money should be made available if at all possible. And we're not the decision makers here. We are making a recommendation, and we're making it strongly because we feel strongly about it. Thank you.
Right, we shall move to a vote on Councillor Lee's recommendation. Would you like to just reiterate what your proposal is for us?
My proposal is that we not only meet the current cost of this service, but the increase of which is, I think, about £500,000, isn't it? The figures are on page 31. £522,805, so that we meet the whole of that cost for the next, shall we say, for the next 12 months. I think that's reasonable. Chair, as well, before we move on, I'd like to repeat my apology to Councillor Whittington. I really didn't mean that. It was the wrong terminology. I don't think for a minute he's dishonest, and I shouldn't have said that. So, thank you.
I'm sure Councillor Whittington will accept that apology.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lee. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay, so it has been proposed and seconded. So all those in favour of the recommendation by Councillor Lee, please do indicate your support now. Okay, so just for the record then, so that's Councillor Mrs Overton, Councillor Lee, Councillor Carter, Councillor Mrs Clark, Councillor Kendrick are all supporting. Any against? Oh, and Councillor Clark, I do apologise. Well, I believe that is a majority. So the recommendation... Oh, I'm sorry, and abstentions as well on that one, please. Well, hold on, so abstentions is Councillor Sear and myself as chair, and then against is Councillor Whittington. Thank you. So therefore, in terms of the agenda item on 6, so our recommendation 1 is the point that Councillor Lee has just recommended. Do we have any additional comments to be passed to the executive that anyone would like to be recorded at this point? No? Then that concludes that agenda item. Thank you very much for the debate, and thank you, officers, as well, for your contributions on that one. I think we'll make a little bit more. Are we happy to make a little bit more progress before we have a quick 5-minute break? Oh, on a vote of 1, we'll have a break. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Yeah.
And it does both with the iPad and the iPhone as well.
All right.
As a double, so it has a double. Yeah.
Right, well, we are all returned nice and refreshed, so therefore we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is the Shared Lives Service recommissioning. So this item is found on pages 25 to 101 of our pack. And this is Councillor Mrs Wendy Bowkett, the Executive Council for Adult Care and Public, is due to make a decision next week on recommissioning of the Shared Lives Service. I believe we have Justin Hackney to do our presentation. At the beginning of the meeting, we did say if speakers could limit their presentations to 5 minutes, if possible, and then we'll open up for questions. So I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, in case members don't understand, Shared Lives scheme is an umbrella term that refers to a number of different elements of care. The model of care is similar to a foster care model in a way, that the people who are with care and support needs live in a family environment, and that can be on a long-term basis or a short-term basis, or it can be providing day provision as well. So the current contract is provided by PSS, but the contract ends on the 31st of March 2025. We've looked at various options in terms of the way forward around reprovision, so the normal do nothing option, renegotiate the contract, but there's no extension allowed with that. There has been work to look at the in-house option as well, but the in-house option, as I understand it, and Col will be able to answer questions on that if necessary, is significantly more expensive as an option than going back out to the market. So the preferred option is to go back out to re-tender, and we're looking at proposing a 5-year contract with the ability to extend that for a further 5 years. There has been a review of the existing arrangements to inform the re-tendering exercise, and the review, the key part of the review really was that there's a risk potentially of a drop-off of existing arrangements. So we currently have 55 people who live on a long-term basis with families. We have 17 people who receive short-term care, and then there's just one person receiving sort of day support separate to that. But the key message that came from the engagement and the review is that the rates that we're currently paying shared lives carers is very, very low in comparison to our regional benchmarking and national benchmarking figures. And that was seen as a key barrier in terms of being able to achieve further growth in the future, but also potentially losing existing ground in terms of what we have with shared lives already. The service overall does really well nationally and locally in terms of sort of CQC scores. It's regarded as good quality care, good outcomes, and in a family-based environment as well. But it also offers really good value for money in comparison to other types of care like residential care. And again, national figures would suggest that there's a cost benefit of about £230 a week in comparison to residential care by living in shared lives carers. So this is an area that not only provides good outcomes for people, but is good value for money, and therefore our ambition would be to grow the service, and fundamentally that's why some of the recommendations in the report and the new model is about actually setting the right rate to pay shared lives carers. It's also about having more flexibility in terms of how we set the management fee with the successful provider as well. I think that pretty much concludes the introduction, so we can open it up to questions to the committee.
Excellent. Right. Well, I've got just 2 questions for you actually, and the first one's around, and you sort of briefly touched upon it in terms of outcome measurement and quality of care. So I suppose, how is the success of the shared lives services being evaluated, especially in terms of quality of life outcomes for service users compared to traditional care settings? And are there more sort of innovative approaches to monitor and assess that impact?
Okay, thank you. So as part of the re-provision exercise, we did get a national lead organisation called Shared Lives Plus that has an overview of all shared life schemes nationally to come in and actually look at it. And they provided some evidence there around the great outcomes that shared life schemes generally provide for people in terms of maintaining people's independence, but supporting people to achieve the outcomes that have been identified within their care and support plan. So, I mean, if it's helpful, we could summarise some of that feedback, if you like, and share that with the committee. I mean, and I think building on that, really, it's our overall approach to assessment and care management as well, and strength-based practice. So we do that through our assessment and care management teams, and some of the work that we've been doing with Empower around looking at needs in a different way and being able to help people to maximise their independence and to achieve the outcomes they need, and being able to measure that in a sort of more of a trends way rather than just as an event in terms of the annual review. So it all comes really back to assessment and care management, working in a personalised way with the individual, seeing what needs they have, what ambitions they have, and then through the annual review process and other mechanisms, making sure that they're achieved. And as I say, CQC, they're an inspected service, so they'll also get quality ratings on it. So does that answer your question?
That does, and yeah, it'd be interesting to see some of that feedback as well that you're discussing. And then in terms of sort of scaling and expanding services from the report as well, so what opportunities sort of exist to scale the Shared Lives programme further to meet this increasing demand?
Yeah.
And how are we going to ensure the quality whilst expanding into those areas or even more complex cases as well?
So it is a challenge. I mean, the numbers are relatively low still overall as a proportion of the number of people we support overall. I think to a degree there's an element of competition with foster carers as well. So we are fishing in the same area really for carers. So I think there's that challenge. And I think also what we've found with the review is that there's almost equally a partnership approach. So we can't just leave it to the provider to achieve that growth, because it's dependent on the referrals from the assessment and care management teams as well. So we need to work in a more joined up way of, you know, longer term planning for the lead-in and the matching of carers. So I think there are some challenges in getting huge growth in these services. I mean, nationally, I think that's been a challenge for all local authorities. But I think working together is the key to it. We have also got some half funding to actually adult social care reform funding to help with some of the growth opportunities as well, which will form part of this contract.
Opening up to questions or comments from anyone? Councillor Kendrick and then Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chairman. I may have missed it in the report, but I was just wondering, as regards to people who provide the service, what sort of level of support do they get, or any training that they receive to support the people that they're looking after?
Yeah. So the management fee that's paid to the overall Shared Lives provider has a big part of that is to provide ongoing support and necessary training, making sure that the required standards are met, but equally making sure that everyone's prepared for CQC assurance as well. And the carers are also entitled to breaks in their own right as well, the Shared Lives carers. So as part of the contract arrangements, that's actually funded as well. So I might want to bring in Carl, actually. You might want to expand.
Yeah, thanks, Justine. So that there are regular visits by the Shared Lives scheme provider to all of the carers who actually host the individuals in receipt of care and support, and support them on a day-to-day basis. So regular visits, support and training
again, hosted and facilitated, some of it in-house, some of it brought in externally, but all funded through the management fee as part of the contract, goes in to support those carers to make sure they're equipped and able to deliver the quality of care that we and the individuals require.
Thanks very much, Chairman. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Tricky question, I know, but do you anticipate any further changes in government policy that's going to affect the service that you provide? That's my first question. And secondly, I notice we again due an almost tight timeline for the contract for next year. Have we been reviewing this for a period of time before you presented this to us? Thank you.
So I'll take the second question first, and the review has been, we've been reviewing, there's regular contract management throughout the term of the contract and regular feedback and looking at opportunities of how to further our joint working in a partnership fashion with the existing provider. And as I say, we commissioned external support with a review as well to do some independent work with that, and then we supplemented that with some further internal review work and feedback with our own internal teams as well. Sorry, did you want to come back on that? Yeah.
I was waiting for you to come back about possible government change.
Sorry, in terms of the possible government changes, it's a very difficult one to answer, I suppose. I think we're always hopeful that there will be an overall recognition of the finances that are needed within adult social care, which would again increase our flexibilities around this and other contracts, but we'll have to wait and see.
Councillor Carter.
Sorry, thank you. You made me jump. As part of the management fee, it says on page 77 at 2.5 regular visits to the carers' homes. I just kind of wondered what actually regular actually means. And 2.5.7 is continuously raising the profile, targeted advertising and marketing. I'm quite alert and aware of what's around me, and I'll be honest, I've never ever come across one bit of advertising for this in probably the whole of South Holland. So I'd be interested to know, they're getting a management fee for this, so would be intrigued to know a little bit more about where they have marketed it. 3.1.4 as one of the positives, it says there that the scheme development workers provide good support to the shared lives carers. That's obviously in complete contrast to 3.2.2, where the carers actually say their satisfaction is low at 83%, and they wouldn't recommend. So whether that's coming from the provider's point of view, and they're saying our support workers are fabulous for the carers, or where a little bit more around that might be interesting if you have any more idea where those kind of opinions have come from. I think the service is great. I absolutely think we should be going out and tendering for it again. The figures obviously are low. It's good seeing the 41% increase on 78, but the figures are low as the starting point. So it would be interesting now to see on the next period of time where that goes. And my final point is 8.4 is really a part of the tender process. How many other providers are there out there? Who are we actually, how many applications are we actually expecting to get, or is the company that we're with now, is that our option type thing? So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll probably lean on Carl to come in on some of this as well. I mean, I think some of the contradictory sort of feedback, if you like, is there have been certain things that we've been managing through the contract. So there have been some contract discrepancies around whose responsibility was it to pay for short breaks for the carers, was it the councils or the providers? So we've had to work through that and get clarity on that with the existing provider. That's sorted, and you know, that's helped in terms of satisfaction level of the carers. I think generally the big message is that you're not paying enough as well. So I think that's affected the feedback, and that's what we're looking to correct through this. The advertising, I'll let Carl pick up. The re-tendering, I mean, we did, when this existing contract was let, the commercial team did quite a lot of market engagement and courting. We did have several bids, and PSS were the most successful, obviously because they were awarded it, and they are one of the big players. So we're not fishing in a massive pond though for this provision. So, I mean, I think the area question around the management fee is something that through the commissioning board has been challenged as well, and around how that actually looks in comparison to the overall, you know, fee, etc. But again, it needs to be a rounded look at that really in terms of what the external provision looks like in terms of the alternative cost of an in-house service, and again, I think the work that's been done is there's a significant difference. So I think having that flexibility to look at the management fee rather than it as a standard fee based on the individual needs of the carers and the individual as well is going to be helpful. But did you want to come in on the other bits, Carl?
Yeah, thank you. The question on the size of the market, it is a small specialist market. As Justin said, when this was last re-tendered in 2018 for a contract start 2019, we had 3 active bidders, of which PSS offered the best value solution. As part of the market engagement in preparation for this current recommissioning and tendering exercise, we've had 5 organisations interested, participating actively in that market engagement process, and we'd be hopeful that, you know, most, if not all of those, will participate in the tender process. Your first question, I think, was about the frequency of the carer visits. That's at least quarterly, but that can vary and increase in frequency according to, you know, the circumstances for the individual being supported and the carer. The advertising and promotion question, which is obviously a really important part of what the scheme provider is responsible for, is targeted at 2 groups predominantly. There's the promotion and the engagement work with the referrer cohort, which is adult social care area teams, and the other key aspect is about carer attraction, and I think that's perhaps where your question was. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this has been borne out by some of the work that the National Representative Organisation of Shared Lives Schemes does, but the vast majority of successful carer recruitment is based on positive recommendations, word of mouth stuff from existing carer cohorts. Now, obviously, that's not exclusively what the shared life service provider is doing in targeting and promoting to try and attract new carers into the profession, if you like. But that is a key element of it, absolutely a key element of it. And working with the carers themselves, the existing carers, to go with them to events to promote the shared lives carer profession is one way that they look to do that, as well as specialist support groups, because shared lives caring as a profession creates its own networks and support networks, and you know, a lot of the activity that they invest in doing is about facilitating that, the community of shared lives carers and the people who are supported through it, to try and grow the service and improve its reach and awareness in the communities where those carers and people supported live.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions, really. I understand the services that Shared Lives deliver, and I commend that. I think it's an excellent service. But I think it's the budget bit I just want to ask a little bit about. On page 82 at the top, 7.2, there's a graph of the costs, and 2019 to 20, for instance, was just over 700,000, and then by 23-24 that had almost doubled. Is that a cost to the LCC budget for it? Is that what that cost is?
That's the overall cost of the service, yes. So the combination of the carer fee, which the council sets, and the management fee, which again is set at the outset of the contract through the tender process.
Right. That
So
was
the total cost of the service for all people supported. So, you know, obviously the growth in expenditure is reflective of the growth in the size of the service over time, as well as adjustments to reflect inflationary costs.
Yeah, well, my second question, bearing in mind the item that was before this, are there any proposals, is there a finite budget? Are there any proposals to limit or cut the amount that we spend on this service, or should we recommission it? Is it a budget that will be kept in line with inflation and needs?
It is something that's going to be kept in line with inflation and needs. It's the services are funded based on activity.
Yeah.
So obviously any increase in expenditure grows as the scheme grows. In terms of, and Justin might want to come back in on this point, but in terms of the overall cost for the service, whilst the proposal to increase the fees, in particular for the carer cohort, to support the retention and recruitment of carers and support the quality of the services moving forward, does represent an increase on, and therefore a pressure based on the existing budget for the services with the current number of carers.
Can I just stop you there and just ask, how much more will the carers have to pay if it is going up?
Will the carers be paid?
You said there's an increasing cost.
For the carers. So,
is this service going to cost people who need it anymore, or is it there?
No.
It's not a finite.
It will cost the council slightly more than it currently does because we are increasing the fees that we pay to carers. Sorry if I've expressed that wrongly.
Thank you. Given the last item, I'm pleased to hear that no cuts are proposed. That was my point. Thank you.
Yeah, no more proposals today, please. Do we have any others? Councillor Whittington.
Just come back on that. Again, when I first became a county councillor, I think we were spending something like 45% of our entire budget on children's and adult social care, and that's now 65-67%. So it's dramatically increased. We do recognise that the services that involve people do tend to get priority consideration, but it's like the guy who's doing the plate spinning exercise. You're trying to keep all the plates spinning at the same time, but to reiterate the point from earlier, we're having to try and do more and more with less and less all the time, and that I'm afraid is the real challenge, to try and keep all those plates spinning at the same time to make sure that we do try and cover all all these services, and actually we do tend to fund cost pressures in adults and children's social care, but the reality of that means that we then have to find savings out of some of the other budgets. And historically, one area where savings have been made is in highways, because the amount of money we spend on highways has been cash limited for quite a number of years now. Thank you.
Jay, you've got to let me come back on that one. We do spend a huge amount on social care, and I recognise that and I commend that. But every time there is spare money in the budget, there is talk about spending it on highways. So I'm sorry, we spend a lot of money on highways, and I know what I'd rather spend it on.
Hold on. All right, we are not in full council, ladies and gentlemen. We can have that debate in full council. Exactly. If you want to go to highways scrutiny management, you're more than welcome. Right, so I think that concludes all of our speakers. So therefore, the recommendations as per pages 73 and 74, obviously we've got recommendations 1 and 2, and I don't think there's any additional comments to be passed to the executive, so I'm happy to recommend 1 and 2. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Mrs Clark, and all those in favour, please do indicate. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Therefore, agenda item number 8, which is the Day Services Report. So this report is found on pages 103 to 111 of the agenda pack. This report focuses on the 11 centres provided by the County Council. However, the report also refers to the development of the Day Opportunities Strategy, covering both in-house and external provision. And this was first reported to the committee on the 24th of April of this year. And I believe we're back with you again, Justin.
Thank you. Yeah. So we've had regular updates to the Scrutiny Committee around our in-house day opportunities. We have got an existing strategy in place called Living Life to the Full, and we've given sort of regular updates on progress in terms of our success in implementing that overall strategy. As you mentioned, we've got 11 different building-based sites in our in-house service at the minute. Formerly, there were a significant larger number of those, over 30 at one point before we started all of this work. But a lot of that review found that a lot of the previous buildings were in poor condition and unsustainable. And therefore there was a programme of rationalisation of that so that we could get down to a position of greater sustainability, but to make sure that the places that we did have are places that we were proud of, and that the condition of those buildings were of good quality as well. So we have been investing in those services that we have retained as part of a capital programme, and the report provides some sort of pictures and information around some of that work we've been doing. And the Ancaster Day service in Lincoln is arguably our biggest base, and we've done a lot of work around improving the reception area there, the toilets and the washroom areas, and there's current further work going on around sort of the windows in terms of energy efficiency and safety as well. So overall, we've had steady growth in the number of people using our day services, and the numbers in here sort of show both the over 65 population and what we term as the working age adults, 18 to 64. So I mean, I think that was the other key thing that we wanted to share, is that these services are sort of for all adults, and not just working age adults really. There is an offer in all of our services now for older adults, where historically it just used to be the Stamford site. I'll also draw attention to the drop in attendance on page 109, which is this is often what we call our early help offer. So as well as the traditional sort of day services offer in terms of people attending and getting personal care and support, this is sort of more of a wider offer to the wider community to address social isolation, but it's also a part of a wider support offer to families and unpaid carers, really, for people to drop in and have social contact, to have a cup of coffee with other people in the community, but maybe do some volunteering in terms of the gardens at the actual sites. So a range of different activities really. So we're really pleased about that wider drop in attendance and the wider sort of benefits that's promoting. The other thing that we also have done and focused on with the in-house service is to look at offering wider volunteering and employment opportunities, and we've got that. Not all of that is done from the building bases that we have in terms of the traditional day services. We've got the Quad here restaurant, where you'll see there's been sort of significant opportunity around volunteering for adults, but also young people coming up with special educational needs. Had a number of success stories where young people have volunteered and they've gone on to study at catering college, and we've actually got 4 people we employ now as part of the quad arrangements as well, so it's leading to employment as well. We're doing similar things with community cafes at the Boston Scott House site, and we're also exploring further ventures really with Network Rail and being able to use some of our other sites around doing that as well. So it's been a key opportunity really in terms of promoting volunteering and employment opportunities. The report also mentions some of the sort of wider work that we've been doing around promoting short break opportunities for families. We've been able to do sort of like outward bound activities in the Lake District for families supported by the day opportunities. And you know the range of the work is sort of wide ranging in terms of the benefits as well really. So Derek as Director of Public Health will be pleased with the smoke-free site stuff that we've been doing with people who utilise the services, but also the staff that deliver services as well. And we're looking at continuous improvement in terms of looking at needs assessment tools to make sure that you know the right amount of care is being utilised to meet needs as well really. So just finally, what with the existing strategy for the in-house services is coming to the end of its life. And with the new DAS coming in, we've agreed that we want to have a look at it in a wider strategic context and look at the next strategy, looking at external and in-house services. So there's a strategy group that's been set up to look at that. These in the report are the ambitions that we've identified for that strategic review. They've been informed with discussions with carers and people who use our services as well. But we'll be happy to sort of take feedback from the committee on, you know, whether they feel they're the right ambitions and whether there's anything else you'd like to see in that. And then, you know, we'll be able to give updates to the committee in the future as the work progresses on the development of that wider strategy.
No, thank you very much. And as a division member for Stamford, I know, and I've visited recently our Ryle Road facility, and it's great to see it being so well used. And thank you for the new roof as well, and fixing that for us. I think in terms of, and obviously actually, because a lot of the discussion we've had today on our agenda items are around financial sustainability, and obviously, you know, we know. You know, as a council, financial sustainability in terms of our day services with increased demand and funding remains tight. Are we looking at building those partnerships with voluntary organisations and private sector partners to be a part of that solution moving forwards? Because obviously in Stamford, we have a really strong and healthy community set up, and actually it'd be great to see if we could do potentially more work with them. Is that an opportunity?
Most definitely, and we already doing that to an extent, in terms of, you know, looking at our existing buildings and offering an opportunity for the wider community to use those buildings, and, you know, sort of almost like a hybrid approach really. I think I know that the strategy we need to look at will need to be more holistic and look at, you know, a geographical area and look at the balance of services we've got in there, and overall, you know, how do we work together to achieve those outcomes. The review will also need to inform the retender of our external daycare services and what that might be looking at. So, you know, there'll be a need to actually look at our place in the market, if you like, in terms of the county council and also what the market can provide in its own right. But absolutely, joint working has to be at the heart of that, whatever the model might look like.
I think just expanding on what you said, in terms of the needs of our service users, in terms of, you know, the shift, I guess, in generations and everything else, how are we ensuring that our daycare services are evolving to meet those changes? You know, are we planning to incorporate more specialised services in dementia support, digital engagement? You know, how are we looking at other opportunities?
I think all of those items will be part of what we need to look at in terms of the new strategy. So there needs to be a piece of work around fundamental needs assessment, around sort of population growth, but also around, you know, those ideas of how we can meet those challenges really. I mean, certainly in terms of the discussions and the areas that I'm trying to promote is that trying to look at the whole service offer rather than just individual parts of it, really. So certainly looking at, you know, how many people how can we maintain people's and maximise people's independence, and day service plays a really key strand in that, in terms of, you know, not just care to the people who we're supporting, but also to the wider family, and sustaining those family-based care arrangements often as well. So I think, you know, but we'll need to look at digital, we'll need to look at, you know, a range of different interventions. So I think when we're looking at day services, you also need to look at the wider service offer as well, don't you? So it is quite a big strategic review.
Just finally for me, so what's the timeline with the strategy? When are you hoping to come back to us as a committee?
Carl, when's the retender of the external? Can you remember?
So 2 years from this October.
Yeah, so we've got a decent chunk of time to do the strategy and get it ready to inform the retender. But as I say, there is quite a lot of work to do, and I think one of the other elements of it is around actually making sure we've identified the capacity to do that work as well. So there is some work going on at the minute within adult care to look at our commissioning capacity and our analytical capacity to inform the strategic work. So that's part of it really, why we've got a decent chunk of time to look at it. But I mean, maybe we could come back in 6 months' time and give you an update on where we are.
Yeah, we can see who's still here after the election. That'd be good. Right, who's first then? Councillor Whittington, and then.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for the report. Just a question I'm going to ask is around Grantham Day Services. I was Mayor of Grantham up until May of this year, and during my time, I think I went about 3 or 4 visits to them, because they are based in the Guildhall in Grantham, just above the Mayor's Parlour, and they are in sort of accommodation which is temporary, but it's not really at all suited to the service they're trying to provide. And I know that an alternative site in the Grantham area has been, well, I think this has sort of been ongoing for quite some time now. I'm just wondering what update you've got on trying to find a more suitable location for the Grantham Day Service Centre. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it has been. Thank you. It's been a continued frustration, and we are reliant on our corporate property team in terms of sourcing that. They're working really hard to look at alternatives. We've escalated it up to the relevant AD and have reconfirmed the importance of, you know, finding an alternative and the commitments that have been made to those families previously. And we'll continue the search, but we generally keep drawing a blank in terms of being able to find suitable accommodation. Unfortunately, we did find one site, but it fell through. But it's a real challenge, but one that we'll continue to push really hard on with our property colleagues. But equally, if anyone, you know, if elected members are aware of any opportunities, please let us know and we'll follow those up.
Councillor Mrs Clark, did you indicate? No? Any other comments? No? Thank you very much. Justin? Therefore, in terms of the recommendations in the report, that the capital investment at the Boundary Street hub in Lincoln be welcomed as an improvement of the facilities at this site, and that initiatives to develop the service such as local support and employment be welcomed. I'm happy to propose those. Any seconder, please? Councillor Sear, and all those in favour, please do indicate. Lovely, thank you very much. That is unanimous. We therefore now move on to agenda item number 9, the Director of Public Health Report 2023. I was about to say it's like topical questions with you now, Derek, so it's a bit of Q&A for you. But I'll hand over to you for your report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very short and sweet with the covering report, because as Scrutiny will remember, you received the Director of Public Health Annual Report 2023 earlier on in the year. I was asked to come back after 6 months because there are specific recommendations in that report. This paper outlines the progress against those recommendations. The cover paper really talks about the governance, so the key part of which I would suggest is that in terms of making sure that we embed those recommendations, which are in the report, so I won't repeat, we have brought together the Ageing Better Steering Group with the Housing, Health and Care Delivery Group, so that we've got one group that looks across the whole piece in terms of ageing well, which is Councillor Bokett's very clear steer for us. Within that structure, we've also created an age-friendly Lincolnshire working group to drive on some of that background. So that's the governance bit, but I think the key part I would draw Scrutiny's attention to are the annexes. So we've got the Housing, Health and Ageing Well Delivery Group Ageing Well Action Plan that shows where we are focusing over the next 12 months and what the specifics are there. And then the Appendix B really goes into the detail, which then ties back to the recommendations I made in the report. So the details there, unless members would like me to go through that, I won't say any more by way of background.
Well, unfortunately, Councillor Marfleet, who was the one that really requested it, isn't here today.
He was. I didn't want to say anything.
So I'm happy to open questions and comments from members. Councillor Mrs Clark, and then...
Thank you for the report, Derek, and it's very informative, and I know that pressures are going to be on you for all sorts of things going forward. So there are a couple of things actually that I am a bit concerned about, and one of them is the digital rollout and that the elderly, particularly in rural areas, who are still not going to be able to benefit from that and will have real confusion about speed. So the rollout, the digital rollout, the removal of landlines, digital speed, how to check digital speed so that you're not being overcharged for a speed that you cannot use, which is sadly right across Lincolnshire. We are experiencing 3G, 4G, possibly 5G. I can travel around where I live, certainly in North Castervan, and you hit 3G on a regular basis. Now, there's so much confusion around this, and so a lot of people will be isolated at home. They're not going to be able to use a digital network. There isn't anywhere for them to go if they live in a hamlet. We've got issues here, and it's coming on fast, and 3G is going to be obsolete. So there needs to be some explanations around that, and I think we need to grasp the nettle fairly quickly so that everybody's properly informed and they know what to do and how to check things. Because there are nightmare scenarios now where people are being contacted, they want to upgrade their service provider, so they'll ring the one that advertises the most. There's lots of them on TV. They will all promise this high speed. They will then speak to them about, well, you need this and you need that, and have you got a smart TV? A lot of them don't know what a smart TV is. Have you got this? And they might be charged for gaming. They might be charged for all sorts of things on a high speed that they can't use, that doesn't match where they live. So there's actually no regulation around that at all, and I think we need to be informative now in our rural area, particularly, that we need to safeguard that, because money's tight. We've talked about all sorts of things this morning, so that for me is a real area. The digital side of things, I think a lot of it actually you've grasped, and we're trying to do such a lot with a small amount of money. And that, sadly, that's, I think, for Lincolnshire, unless people here can prevent that and have serious conversations about making sure that we get the funding we need to deliver this quality service that we are so highlighted for. Lincolnshire is a leader. We need to have a strong voice. So there is so much ahead of you. I wish you well, but I do need that addressing, because for me that's a real issue. Thank you. Sorry to go on.
Yeah, I agree. I think is the rollout of consistent, accessible, fast internet connections, whether that's 4G, 5G, whether that's fibre optic cables, is absolutely fundamental to connecting up our citizens. And we talked about it in the DPH report about how transport is absolutely fundamental in a county like ours. But when we look at the new Secretary of State for Health and Care's priorities, they are prevention, which is absolutely where I would be, as you would expect, moving care closer to home, which in somewhere like Lincolnshire is going to be really important. The more that we can deliver close to where people live rather than trying to drag them into our acute settings in Boston or Lincoln is going to be really important. And digital, which is really good in terms of recognising the role that digital technology can play in terms of health and care services, but it's really important that we've got the infrastructure, and it's really important that digital is seen as a way to connect people together as well. The expectation is there will be a health plan in the spring, is what we're being told, and that there will be a health board that cuts across government. So I think some of the points that you've made, Councillor Clark, hopefully will be picked up by that health board, but will feed into some of the infrastructure development that the government needs to do, especially in large rural, coastal, dispersed populations like Lincolnshire.
Councillor Clark, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 123, you mention action required, and you've mentioned there the Ageing Better Conference in November. Will you be setting the agenda for that, or will somebody else?
So the agenda will be set through the Housing, Health and Ageing Well Delivery Group. Got to get the acronym right. Which is a cross-organisational group that Councillor Boker chairs, and that will come from the bottom up. So it'll be what different partners and the community and voluntary and faith sector want to talk about. That's where the agenda will be set, and then we'll build around it.
Councillor Whittington, you're next.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, that's a very interesting point that's been raised about digital rollout, and you know, all comes down again to funding, doesn't it? I mean, the reality is around this that we've been Lincolnshire. We've had a fairer funding campaign now for a number of years. I'm the County Council representative on the Rural Services Network. I actually sit on the National Executive Committee of the RSN, and the RSN have also been doing a rural fairer funding campaign for many years. The reality is, if Lincolnshire was funded on the same per capita basis as the average urban area, we would have an extra £120 million a year. We'd have the money for our homeless service, we'd have the money for digital rollout, we'd have the money to improve an awful lot of our services and deal with a lot of the backlog maintenance issues we've got in around highways and things like that. The new government has promised in a year they're going to doing a new spending review, and my challenge to them is look seriously and urgently at the underfunding of rural areas. That is a challenge to them, because if we were funding on the same basis as urban areas, we'd have £120 million extra. We'd have the money to be able to do an awful lot of what we've been talking about this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think in the interest of being partial there, Mark, I think the issue I've got with that is it's a shame we didn't do that in the last 14 years. Who was next on this? Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to echo the comments by Councillor Nicola Clark, and just to say that this morning's meeting has been one of the most interesting and productive and positive meetings that I've had at this committee for quite some time now. I've found it really, for everybody, the whole meeting has been really interesting. And I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I hear your response, Derek, and we have obviously got a Labour government, a new government, and my contact locally with that is Hamish Falconer, who I meet on a regular basis, and I will pass all of this on. I mean, he's only one person, and I don't think he's got that much sway, but, you know, I will pass all of these comments, and I will fight the corner. But I'd echo what you say. You know, we've had 14 years of not getting fairer funding, and there are some really tough choices to be made. There are holes in the economy, and it's not going to be an easy few years, whoever is in government. I think we've got some tough years and some tough choices ahead. I wish we hadn't, but we have. That is the reality, but I will fight the corner. I do take things in and write things down in this chamber, and I will take all of this forward, because I'm with you, you know, I'm wanting decent funding settlement and to be able to run really good high quality services and not be constantly scraping about for money. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Clark.
Yes, thank you, Callum, for indulging me. Sorry, Derek, in my rant about teleservices, I actually forgot to talk about, let me just get onto it again here. Yeah, telecare response. Now, digitally, there's an issue around that, I believe, that if you've got telecare response or if you've got that one of those care line things, it can't be supported digitally. That was the point I was going to be making. I do have information from EE that if you want to lose your landline number, if you're not having a landline and you can keep your number, but they cannot support this telecare service digitally. It can't. Now, a lot of our rural people rely on that thing round the neck. They press the button or they've got a telecare service on the door. It can't support it digitally. So that was what I was wanted to say as well, please, because we've got so many who will rely on that service. And if it's not supported digitally and we've got this digital rollout and people aren't clear about it, we've got a problem. And better to look at it now and avoid the problem and sort it and highlight it and make sure they've got the information so that family and family members can take over that role and make those changes where they're necessary, and isolated people are cared for by where we pick up so there's no gaps. But that was the one thing that I really needed to highlight. Thank you. Sorry about the rant.
Yeah, just to provide some assurance to Councillor Clark and the committee that we, as a council, have a digital strategy and we're piloting a change in the technology that we support individuals with. I think the sort of telecare model is an analogue model because it worked at that point. What we've got to do is make sure that we use all of the digital technology that's available to us now in the right way for the right people at the right time. And by we, I mean society. I don't necessarily mean the council goes in and puts kit in and monitors it and comes out straight away. There's a huge amount that people in Lincolnshire can do for their loved ones themselves with relatively low cost technology. It comes back to your point about there needs to be a stable broadband connection for this to work. Otherwise, it's just cameras and various other bits sitting there not connected up to anywhere. So that infrastructure is fundamental to this. But the technology is moving so quickly, and we do have a pilot at the moment which is looking at sort of high number, low cost solutions. So things like passive monitoring. So somebody who maybe is at risk of falling and being disconnected, you can put passive sensors in, and over 6 weeks or so, the technology understands what the normal pattern is for that individual, when they might turn the TV on or make a cup of tea, remote monitoring, obviously all with consent. And if that individual does what they normally do, nothing happens. If that individual doesn't do what they normally do, then automatically there can be a message sent to their loved ones to say you might want to check in on mum because she's not put the kettle on. Within the window that normally she'd put a kettle on a Tuesday, and obviously with AI it can get quite sophisticated. That's the sort of, and again it's a language thing, I would say that's preventative, it's secondary prevention. Somebody we know has got a risk, but it's helping them live a better life at home, and it's really important. It helps loved ones be more comfortable and know that they're, the person they're looking after, even if it's remotely, is just going about their normal day and knowing that they'll be alerted if that's changed. So there's that sort of thing, and then there's people who've got really complex LD needs, which could be quite a high cost technological package, but because the care that those individuals require is hugely expensive, if it helps that individual live a better life, it can also actually save quite a lot of money as well. So we're doing both ends of the spectrum, and we'll be coming back to scrutiny and to council with that, and hoping to expand it. But at Councillor Whittington's point and scrutiny's recognition of this is going to cost money, one of the questions is how much should public services put this sort of information in, how much should families do, and it's absolutely fundamental we make sure that if the council does something, it works with NHS and health services systems. And I've got the overall integrated care system lead for that sort of stuff, working with the integrated care board and the NHS to make sure that that happens and we don't have different things that don't talk to each other.
Wonderful, thank you very much, Derek. I see no further speakers on that one. So in terms of the recommendations for this agenda item, you'll see on pages 124 to 125, there are 5 recommendations. I'm not intending to read them out, but I'm happy to take them en bloc. So I'm happy to propose. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sear, and all those in favour, please do indicate. Thank you very much. Thank you, Derek, for attending. Therefore, our final agenda item is agenda item number 10, which is our Scrutiny Committee work programme. Simon, is there anything you want to add to it?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. On the 22nd, if I just draw the committee's attention to page 137, on the 22nd of January, the committee is due to receive the Director of Public Health's annual report for 2024. So that's an addition to the item. Chairman, I don't know whether you wish to make an announcement about the proposal for the change of date of the March meeting, or the decision on the change of date for the March meeting. I can advise the committee on the rationale for that, but it's in order to consider an item before the executive in early March. Thank you.
Yes, so essentially and you can tell me when I'm getting this wrong. So the meeting on the 19th of March is going to change to the 26th of February, just to fit into our elected decision-making process. I just thought noting, if you're happy with that. Otherwise, are we all happy? Are we all agreed with this? Yeah, I'll just take it as agreed. Lovely, thank you. Therefore, that finally brings us to an end of our deliberations today. Thank you so much for your indulgence today. The next meeting will be on the 20th of November, where normal service will be resuming with Councillor Marfleet in the chair. And I will look forward to sitting in this chair here at the meeting. Thank you very much.